Good morning and welcome to Politics at Jack and Sam's Daily, which whizzes through everything you need to know in British politics in under 20 minutes.
It is Thursday, October the 17th. It is going to be another glorious summer's day. And I am here down the other end of a Zoom call. There is no fire crackling behind you, Sam, but it is really, really dark outside. I was just thinking this morning as I was crawling around my house at 5:30 in the morning that when the clocks go back, we're actually going to benefit from this. I've spent years moaning about the farmers of Great Britain who've made us put the clocks back at this time of year and sort of ruined the afternoons. But now as an early riser, this is going to be lovely, lovely morning sunshine for us, isn't it, for a few weeks?
The clocks go back for Scots and for early morning podcasters. We're coming to the end of what feels like a very, very long week in British politics, even though not much has happened in front of the cameras and in public. And it's a week, really, that the world, too, is holding its breath. Overnight, Kamala Harris gave an interview to Fox News. She promised to be a clean break candidate from Joe Biden if she's elected as president. The question is, can Keir Starmer be a clean break prime minister from Keir Starmer after his first 100 days? Cheap joke, but never mind. Anyway, there are only two big things we're going to talk about this week. The budget and where that's all ended up, and then the Tories. But we'll spend a little bit of time as well, because next week's going to feel weird. All this stuff, critical stuff going on at home, but everyone seems to be abroad and there are big, big issues going on. So should we start with the budget?
Yeah, we should definitely start with the budget because we have on our hands, Sam, a cabinet revolt over the scale of the spending cuts that Rachel Reeves is proposing to make or considering making in the budget on October the 30th. We've been saying all week that the budget is being finalised right now. Rachel Reeves thought to have sent off her sort of major spending decisions to the Office for Budget Responsibility last night, Wednesday night. For auditing, which means the sort of key parameters of the budget ought now to be baked in. And we have this extraordinary story breaking on Wednesday afternoon via colleagues at Bloomberg News, or former colleagues of mine at Bloomberg News. Well done them for getting the brilliant story that 3 cabinet ministers written to Keir Starmer to formally protest about the scale of the cuts that their departments are going to be making. They've been named by the Times and by yourself, Sam, as Angela Rayner, the Housing Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, the Justice Secretary, and Louise Haigh, the Transport Secretary. How normal do you think this is for a cabinet minister to be writing to the Prime Minister 2 weeks out from a budget to formally protest about what they think is going to be imposed upon by the Treasury? Is this something that happens every year, or is this really a big deal?
If you listen to people at the top of government, the kind of people around Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves, they absolutely insist this is part of what happens at this stage of a spending review where you determine a government's budgets. But, Jack, what is not normal is the scale of concern that is flooding in my direction this close to the budget. Now, let's be absolutely clear, kind of as you said, but put it up in lights. The budget is basically done. As of last night, I did a sort of phone around Whitehall, and there was no disagreement. Those measures were heading off to the OBR late last night. I think it was a long day in the Treasury, and nobody, including in areas where I think that they were having difficulties with the budget, was there anybody saying, I think that we've got a delay, we need an extra day, we're going to miss our deadline? In other words, these letters of concern, and I'm not sure all the concern was expressed in letters, I think there are other methods as well. All of these cabinet ministers who have gone over Rachel Reeves' head to the Prime Minister have done so kind of in the last 48 to 72 hours of the entire process. It feels like an emergency appeal to Downing Street. Now, it's not just these 3 cabinet ministers. I'm told all over the place that every department has been sort of struggling a bit, and others have gone and engaged Downing Street beyond those 3 as well. Different departments taking different approaches, different departments using different negotiating tactics with the Treasury. But I think the scale of the problem that cabinet ministers feel they're going to have is significant. Now, I kind of thought something was up yesterday when watching Prime Minister's Questions, because Keir Starmer was sat in between Angela Rayner on one side and Rachel Reeves on his other. And Rachel Reeves just looked so cross, very occasionally in the Commons, when you have a big set piece event, you can see from somebody's faces that they look really tense and really unhappy. And I have to say, that was true of Rachel Reeves at PMQs yesterday. And then the Bloomberg story dropped. Now, the question is, for those cabinet ministers who have gone to number 10 and asked for help, and now I'm not just talking about those three, but more widely, has it been any good? Well, I am told for those that have been in discussions with the centre, if you went to Keir Starmer absolutely gets the scale of the challenge, I'm told. And in some areas, there has been some movement, some help to try and stop some of the worst of the cuts that cabinet ministers are being asked to implement. But by and large, if you appeal to Keir Starmer has largely backed Rachel Reeves and the approach that her and Darren Jones in the Treasury has taken. In other words, yes, there's been some last-minute finessing, I think, from the conversations that I can. But ultimately, the shape of this budget, which is to raise the vast bulk of the 40 billion needed in tax cuts, but with several billion needed in spending reprioritizations, and not a huge amount on welfare reductions, the broad shape has remained the same. And so everybody's just got to now take a deep breath for 2 weeks and see when the budget lands on October the 30th, whether it is as painful and disruptive as the cabinet ministers fear, or people can see the sunny uplands and just believe in the optimism of having more money for different bits of public services, which is what number 10 and number 11 hope.
Just want to take a step back, Sam. We are still only, 3.5 months into this government, and it could hardly have been telegraphed more clearly by the Prime Minister and the Chancellor that this budget, when it came, was going to be a painful one for the public, for government departments that are not protected, not having their spending protected. They have really made this very repeatedly clear since the very first few weeks Labour got into power, and yet here we are a couple of weeks out from the budget, and we have this extraordinary public display of infighting. Now, it seems to me it's totally normal when budgets are being set that there is back and forth between departments and the Treasury. That does happen every year, of course it does. Every department wants more money for their pet projects or wants to protect things from being cut, and that's absolutely normal that back and forth would happen. But for letters to be written and then for someone to go and tell the press 2 weeks before the budget that these letters have been written. I mean, we've got an actual cabinet minister quoted in the Times here complaining that the budget is going to be totally self-defeating. That is a member of the cabinet that's just been elected to this government. This is supposed to be like Labour's glorious moment after 14 years of opposition. Everyone should be completely singing from the same hymn sheet at this point, and yet here they are slugging it out in public, briefing the press against the Prime Minister, against the Chancellor, ahead of Labour's first budget in 14 years. And I just think it's just amazing, again, to look at just how unprepared for government Labour appears to be. We had it a few weeks ago with all the infighting in number 10 that ended up with Keir Starmer feeling it necessary to completely overhaul his entire Downing Street operation, just 100 days less than 100 days into government. And now we see it with the cabinet in public revolt, briefing the press against the Prime Minister and the Chancellor ahead of this huge political moment for Labour. This budget really, really, really needs to land well, given how poorly other things have gone so far. And it appears that those efforts are being undermined by members of the cabinet. And I just think, for people not to be able to see the bigger picture and see the political damage that they are doing to themselves by having it out in public like this, to me is just amazing. And it really does beg the question for where things are going to go from here. Even if the budget isn't as bad for government departments as some of the cuts they've been modelling suggests, and maybe Rachel Reeves finds some more tax rises and manages to reduce some of these departmental cuts a bit, it just is indicative of a team that is not all on the same page, and you just wonder where the next explosion of infighting for this Labour government is going to be. And don't forget, Sam, if there's one thing that the public really, really hates, it's divided parties in power. It just gives this sense of incompetence, and that they're just too busy fighting with themselves to do a good job running the country, and it will be very, very damaging for Labour's reputation with the public if this sort of thing carries on.
Let me read you the words of one cabinet minister to me in the last few days. It's pain this year, and it's pain next year. We're simply going to be digging a hole which we end up filling in later in the Parliament. So that is some of the criticism that you're getting from the very top table that I'm picking up. You can't put it more starkly. Rachel Reeves' authority is on the line on this. She has charted a particular course. She is the architect of all the reasons this government ended up being hemmed in as a result of manifesto promises, some of which she's trying now to flex, and the architect of the overall shape of this budget, hoping to give more money in some places, but at the expense of short-term pain elsewhere, in part to fund public sector pay rises. And cabinet ministers are going, we don't trust this. But in the end, Number 10 have sided with Rachel Reeves, more or less. And if it goes wrong after October the 30th, then I think that is big, big trouble for somebody who has made very, very increasingly controversial calls when it comes to the economy over the last few months. So I think she will be feeling the pressure more than anybody else at the moment. So no smiles yet from Rachel Reeves. One of the curiosities of this budget is that the major measures might have gone to the Office for Budget Responsibility, but there's still quite a lot of work to do. You can make small changes, stuff in the tens, maybe hundreds of millions over the next few days, and they've all got to write the budget speech and sort of do a bit of finessing. But the top of government is about to leave the country. So sort of remarkably, in the week up to Keir Starmer's biggest political event, he's got the Commonwealth Heads of Government Summit in Samoa. Just for context, that is 36-hour plane journey to Samoa, 36 hours on the ground, and 36 hours plane journey back, right? So that is a complication if you're trying to do the biggest political event so far of your government. Rachel Reeves, well, she's off to the IMF in Washington, so she's also out the country for part of this period. And these things are exhausting. Of course you can work remotely. Of course you can do that. But they will have big other things on their agenda at this point, whether it's a thorny issue in Chogam of reparations, which I think is going to be on the table. They want Commonwealth countries want reparations discussed. Britain is going to say no. Whether it's the ongoing crisis over Ukraine, President Zelensky begging for more weapons, but increasingly there isn't the capacity to manufacture them, particularly when there's the war in the Middle East going on, and so difficult conversations going on in private around that. And frankly, when it comes to the Middle East, Israel is expected to move on Iran imminently. We don't know exactly when, but certainly before the US presidential election. So the bandwidth of government, certainly the bandwidth of Number 10, is squeezed at the point where they need to be focusing on this event the most.
I rather like the idea of Keir Starmer being so sick of having to listen to Angela Rayner moaning about her budget that he's flying off to the South Pacific next week to sort of hula skirts and dancing on the beaches of Samoa with King Charles rather than listening to his cabinet complaining about their funding settlements. One of the
people travelling with the Prime Minister, perhaps on the journalist side, did say to me, "I'm packing my snorkel."
You know it's a good PM trip when you're packing your snorkel. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the IMF and the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting are obviously things that the Prime Minister and the Chancellor need to attend. They have also been long in the diary, so they would have known that this was going to be an issue running up against the budget. And of course, it was in the government's gift to decide when the budget was. It's worth pointing out Keir Starmer cut short his trip to the South Pacific. There was going to be a much longer trip to taking in Australia as well. And they decided not to do that for the reasons you're setting out, because it's felt that the Prime Minister needs to be in the country. But you're right, there's going to be a gap at the top of government next week. And maybe that noise will be filled by Angela Rayner and other cabinet ministers complaining instead. Should we talk about the Tories, Sam? Because it is actually a very big day in the Tory leadership contest. We were a bit mean about them yesterday and didn't give them really any airtime at all. Tonight is the night that the only currently scheduled head-to-head live TV debate between the two remaining contenders for the Tory leadership, Kemi Badenoch and Robert Jenrick, takes place. It is, for those of you who love watching politicians complain about each other, it is live on GB News at 7 p.m. Christopher Hope top political journalist, will be leading the debate. And it feels to me actually quite a big moment this, Sam, because this is definitely a close race between these two. Nobody really seems to know who's going to win. It's very hard to get a handle on the Tory membership. And it's felt like the momentum shifts in this race have been significant between various candidates over the last few months. And therefore, the one, if it is the only one, although I guess more might yet be scheduled, the one big head-to-head between them seems to be a moment when undecided voters might actually make up their mind. So I feel like the stakes are actually pretty high tonight for Jenrick and Badenoch, and voting has just about now started amongst Tory members. We've seen pictures of ballot papers on social media and so forth. Lots of the ballot papers will be arriving today, and so it is make your mind up time for whatever we decided it was, 150,000 or so Tory members between these two candidates. So yeah, I think the stakes are pretty high. We got an endorsement from Robert Jenrick last night from the PopCon movement, the Popular Conservatives. That is the Liz Truss vehicle, although Liz Truss herself insists she is not backing a candidate, and shouldn't be reflected of her backing for either of them. But a boost for Robert Jenrick. Still feels like he's the one trying to make the running here, Sam. Do you think he can change the game tonight, or is it actually the case that when people see Robert Jenrick, they like him less than they thought they did?
Well, look, I think there's a clear difference in approach right now between the two candidates. Robert Jenrick is going down the avenue of just promising more specific policy. So yesterday we heard he wanted to cut the basic rate of income tax by 2p. He wants to stop what he says is the medicalising of normal human stress by signing people off work unnecessarily, which is causing a crippling benefits bill. And he wants the kind of work capability assessments, which assess people's fitness for work, to be toughened up with greater sanctions for those who don't take jobs. So he's doing specifics. She seems to be doing big picture. She's talking about it being an existential moment for the Conservative Party, and saying that it doesn't really have a right to exist if it gets some decisions wrong. I want to highlight one thing in this race that fascinates me, and actually it's something that doesn't divide the two candidates, but I think, if I'm reading it right, unites them, although I explain why it's a little unclear. Yesterday we spoke at length, I think rightly, about the assisted dying debate, the bill that's been introduced to Parliament that's coming at going to be voted on at the end of November. Now, what's interesting is that both leadership contenders appear to oppose the change. So Robert Jenrick does so very clearly. He just says, I am a skeptic of changing the law, right? You can see politically why he's doing that. That I think is much more in the Tory DNA than it is in the DNA of MPs in the other parts of Parliament. Kemi Badenoch says, on assisted suicide, personally, I am sympathetic to assisted suicide, but I know how government works. I have seen it from the inside. I do not trust government or civil service to be able to deliver this. And I am told by her team that means she's opposing it. Now, let's wait and see, because clearly her statement in public that was given at Tory conference is a little ambiguous, but it feels like she's leaning in towards opposing it as well. And that's certainly what her team told me yesterday. So you have probably whoever leads the Tory party opposing something that the Prime Minister is in favour of in this big free vote. That I think is just a little straw in the wind that will matter.
Yeah, and as you say, it feels very much like those views are probably aligned with where lots of Tory members are. You get the sense, certainly when this issue was last voted on by a Parliament dominated by Tory MPs, it was fairly quickly shut down by Parliament, and we're expecting potentially a different result now. There's so many Labour MPs. I just wanted to highlight one other thing from the PopCon endorsement of Robert Jenrick yesterday. The group's director, Mark Littlewood, said, I am completely persuaded that Robert Jenrick's political thinking has been born of real experience, not of crafty political positioning. That's interesting, because that is precisely the opposite view of every Tory MP I've spoken to about Robert Jenrick, all of whom seem to think that his sudden conversion to right-wing politics is indeed crafty political positioning, and some suggestion that may actually be harming him now, because not everybody in the Tory party believes he is saying exactly what he thinks. We will find out. Dad, we better stop there. We've had our 20 minutes. Your buzzer must be just about to go. We can get some sleep. It's the end of the week for you and me. We will be back on Monday morning. Have a lovely weekend.
And there is the alarm. We will see you first thing on Monday morning. See you then. Have a lovely weekend.
Cheers, bye.